going to start by thanking the organizers for putting such a wonderful conference together and for having our paper on the program. This is joint work with Tom Kirchmaier at LSE, and we're going to be talking about working from home in the public sector. Organizations around the world are grappling with the new status quo, and they're trying to understand whether they should allow their workers to work from home or not. And when they're trying to make that decision, they'd like to know about the benefits and the costs of such an action. So one very clear benefit is that the workers no longer have to commute. And previous research shows that when workers are allowed to work from home, they take fewer sick days, they take shorter breaks, they also report higher worker satisfaction, better well-being, and this type of arrangements may be particularly helpful for the workers who have caretaking responsibilities. At the same time, it might be harder to monitor the workers when they work from home. Kyle showed us something about that a couple of days ago. And the work by Emma and Natalia show that workers miss out on some important interactions at the office, especially so the less senior ones. And there is evidence that communication and coordination costs might also be higher when workers work from home. So what we're going to do in this paper is that we are going to study the impact of working from home on the performance of the workers in a public sector organization. It's one single organization. Specifically, we're going to rely on administrative and survey data from the Crime Recording and Resolution Unit. This is a division of the Greater Manchester Police in the United Kingdom. The empirical analysis is structured in 3 parts. In the first part, we're going to try to estimate the productivity effects of working from home. And there we're going to leverage a time period in which work location was plausibly randomly assigned to the workers, and the tasks were also plausibly randomly assigned to the workers. In this setting, we find that on days when workers work from home, they are 12% more productive than the days in which they work in the office. However, these local average treatment effects masks a lot of heterogeneity, and we're going to be able to map out the full distribution of individual level treatment effects. We find that reduced distractions at home are an important driver of the productivity gains we estimate. In the second part of the paper, we try to understand whether managers and supervisors in this setting more specifically can play an important role in managing working from home. And here we're leveraging an earlier time period when the managers would assign the tasks to the workers. And when we find that when managers are allowed to assign the tasks to the workers, the productivity gains of working from home are much larger than in a scenario where the tasks are plausibly randomly assigned. In the third part of the paper, we would like to understand whether increasing the share of time that workers spend working from home has any impact on the performance of the workers. And I'm going to mention this briefly now. We will not have time to discuss it in detail today. I'm happy to talk about it offline. But here what we are doing is that we are running an RCT where we compare the status quo, which is a setting where the workers work from home 70% of the time, with one treatment arm where workers are called into the office 1 day per month, similarly to what it was presented yesterday. And we find that working almost exclusively from home does not offer additional productivity gains over the hybrid environment in this setting. We also don't find additional costs, so that's perhaps reassuring. So our work speaks to two broad strands of literature. First and foremost, the literature on working from home. And what we think we can offer to this literature is that we are studying a public sector organization. And this is relevant because it's a setting where the incentives are particularly weak. What we mean specifically is that these workers cannot be fired. There is not much of a career progression within the organization, so the typical career incentives you might have in the back of your mind are really muted in this setting, and there is no pay for performance as well. And the reason why weak incentives are important is because that's the setting where you think working from home might be costly in terms of perhaps reduced effort at home or perhaps more shirking. Another important contribution of our work is that we leverage a within-worker design. So that means that we are going to be able to estimate individual level treatment effects, and we can go beyond the average treatment effects or the local average treatment effects that have been previously estimated in the literature. Our work also speaks to the studies that examine the social determinants of workers' productivity, and especially so to the subset of studies that look at the impact of managers, supervisors, and middle managers on the performance of the workers they oversee. And what we find is that supervisors play an important role in the setting we study. And this is not an aspect that has been explored in the context of the working from home literature, and I was very excited to see that some of you are working on this, and we think this is a very exciting avenue going forward. So let me tell you a tiny bit about the background. We are going to be working with the Crime Recording and Resolution Unit. This is a division of the Greater Manchester Police. Their job is to record crimes in a computer system. This is an individual job. There is no team aspect to it. And importantly, they can do one of three tasks. They're called work streams in this setting. So they can be recording cases from incoming phone calls. They can be recording cases from outgoing phone calls, follow-up phone calls, or they can be triaging cases. That means that some workers evaluate whether the cases they follow under the purview of this specific division, or if they have to be reassigned to a different one. But triaging represents like 8% of the workload, so that's not the bulk of the work they do. Within each work stream, the cases are assigned on a first-in, first-out basis, so that means that they are plausibly randomly assigned to the workers. However, the question is, how are the workers assigned to these work streams then? And we have some interesting variation. So prior to September 22nd, 2023, the supervisors would assign the workers to the work streams. After that day, there is a computer algorithm that makes the assignment. Our argument is that the assignment made by the algorithm is plausibly random, and we're going to show you some evidence that corroborates that claim. All workers rotate through a rotation schedule. This is what the rotation schedule looks like. It determines whether the workers are assigned to work from home or not. The orange entries are when the workers are assigned to work from home. The blue ones are when the workers are assigned to work from the office. It's a 5-week cycle. At the end of the 5 weeks, the cycle repeats. And there are 5 teams, and at each point in time, each team is in a different week of the rotation cycle, so that ensures that at each point in time, there are some workers who are working from home and some that are working from the office. We are going to rely primarily on the daily performance data from November 2022 to October 2024. This data includes the number of cases that each worker records in the system. That's our preferred measure of productivity. We also have some measures of the time spent by the workers to input these cases into the computer system. For a subset of months, we have a measure of quality. This is important because you want to be able to assess the trade-off between quality and quantity. And we're going to combine this data with the personnel files of the workers and data on medical absences, and we ran a brief anonymous survey in October 2024. So we're moving into the first part, where we exploit the plausibly random variation in work location introduced by this rotation schedule, starting from September 22, 2023, which is when the computer starts making the assignment of the workers to the tasks. And so we're going to be comparing the productivity of the workers when they're assigned to work from home versus assigned to work from the office. So this is what the raw data looks like. The orange markers denote the average daily log number of cases recorded for days in which workers work from home. The blue markers are the corresponding estimates when the workers are assigned to work from the office. And what you see is that on average, workers are more productive when assigned to working from home. So next, we're going to put that variation into a regression framework. We're going to regress outcome Y for worker I in day T on an overall constant, a dummy for whether the worker is assigned to work from home or not. And our preferred specification includes a worker and day fixed effects. We don't rely on them for identification. If you do not like them, we can exclude them. All the results are unchanged. Most of the results I'm going to show you today will come from the two stages least squares procedure, where we instrument actual work location with assigned work location. Before looking at the results, we need to think a little bit carefully about identification here. And so our argument is that all the workers rotate through the same deterministic schedule. So if that is the case, over a long enough time period, you would expect our working from home dummy not to be able, assigned to work from home dummy, not to be able to predict the observable characteristics of the workers. And that's something we can test empirically, and we find that. Similarly, our argument is that the computer algorithm assigns the tasks to the workers in a way that is plausibly random. Now, if that is the case, you would expect the dummy of being assigned to work from home not to be able to predict the case characteristics. Again, that's something we can test in the data. And so we see that workers work on observationally similar cases when they're assigned to work from home and from the office. So let's look at some of the main findings. Column 1 reports the first stage. Columns 2, 3, and 4, the two stages least squares estimates. So what we see from column 1 is that being assigned to work from home increases the probability that a worker actually works from home by 73.4 percentage points. Column 2 reports one of the headline numbers of the paper. This is our preferred measure of productivity, and what we find is that when workers work from home, their productivity increases by 12%. Then you might ask, is it that they work longer hours, or is it that they're faster? And columns 3 and 4 tells you it's really coming from the fact that the workers are faster when working from home. So while you might have seen a version of this in other papers, other settings, what I think you have not yet seen before is the next set of graphs, which we think are very interesting. So our within worker design allows us to recover the individual productivity of the worker when they are assigned to work from home and when they are assigned to work from the office. So here we're going to be plotting the individual fixed effects when they're assigned to work from home on those assigned to work from the office, together with a 45-degree line. And these fixed effects are shrunk to account for measurement error. This picture shows you two important patterns. These two sets of fixed effects are very highly correlated. So what that means is that workers who are quite productive in the office are also quite productive at home. And most of these markers are above the 45-degree line. It is in line with the positive treatment effects we just looked at. We can visualize the same variation in a different way. So we can construct individual level treatment effects as the difference in the estimated treatment effect when the worker is assigned to work from home and assigned to work from the office. And so what this picture shows you is the distribution of these treatment effects together with the average ITT, which is the dashed line you see in the picture. So what this figure shows you is that there is a lot of heterogeneity in treatment effects. Some workers are quite a bit more productive at home than they are in the office. That's not true for everybody. A little bit less than a fourth of our workers are actually less productive at home than in the office. So I think the next step is trying to understand, can we predict this variation using workers' characteristics? And what we have in the data is gender, age, and tenure. Using these three variables and the interactions between these three variables, we can explain 12% of the variation you see in the graph. So that means that if you're going to try to predict if a worker is going to be substantially more productive at home relative to how productive the worker is at home, using the observable characteristics, you're not going to be doing a great job. So we try to understand the mechanisms. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to give you a glimpse of what we have in the paper. So we start with a simple set of open-ended questions. We ask the workers, what are the benefits of working from home for you? Now, almost 90% of them say, I don't have to commute. A little bit more than 50% of them say it saves money. They are talking primarily about transportation costs. They report better work-life balance. This is not surprising to anybody in this room, but what we think is particularly relevant for this setting is that 35% of the workers report fewer distractions at home than in the office, and approximately 22% of them report that they are more productive at home than they are in the office. And these can be explained by the fact that the vast majority of them also report having a dedicated workspace at home, so that might be helpful in explaining the productivity effects we find. But another thing that is quite helpful is the office layout. So this is a call center type of situation. So imagine large open room where people are making and taking calls. So this is an inherently very noisy environment. In the paper, we do much more to corroborate this with the data we have. So in the interest of time, let me just give you a brief overview of the mechanisms. We think that these reduced distractions at home are an important drivers of the effects we see. We want to acknowledge that our treatment effects are also consistent with the fact that the workers report better mental health and less stress at home. This is not something we can validate directly, but we acknowledge that's a possibility. We know this is not in line with the work by Emma and co-authors. Importantly, these results are not driven by differences in absenteeism. So we can measure that directly, and we find that workers are less likely to be absent when assigned to work from home. So if we wanted to incorporate that into our estimation, that would make our treatment effects larger and not smaller. Now, an important dimension of the productivity effects of working from home are young children, the presence of young children at home. This is a setting where 60% of workers do not have any children, and the median age of the children, of course, the children that are there, is 17 years old. So for this group, we have very, very few of these workers that have young children at home, and so that is also something you should keep in the back of your mind when you think about the generalizability of our results to other settings. In the paper, we try to roll out alternative explanations. I'm going to mention only one, which is we have a measure of quality stemming from internal audits, and so that allows us to evaluate whether workers who are assigned to work from home, who record more cases and are faster, do that at the expense of basically a worse job, and we don't find evidence of that. So in the second part of the paper, we try to figure out whether supervisors can help harnessing some of these benefits of working from home, or can they play any role in this setting. And so again, here we are going to exploit this earlier time period when the supervisors used to assign the workers to the work streams and hence implicitly to the tasks. And what we find is that when supervisors are allowed to do that, they assign different tasks to the workers when the workers work from home and when the workers work from the office. And what we're going to do in this picture is that we're comparing the baseline two stages least squares estimates. These are the blue bars in the picture, and those are the estimates you saw in the table a few minutes ago, with the corresponding estimates that are computed over these earlier time periods when the supervisors made the assignments. So the difference between the orange and the blue bars is that in the orange bars, the supervisors assign the tasks to the workers. In the blue bars, they are plausibly randomly assigned to them. And if you focus on the two bars on the left, which is our preferred measure of productivity, you see that the productivity gains of working from home are larger when the supervisors make the assignment relative to a setting where the tasks are plausibly randomly assigned to the workers. We try to dig into this a little bit more, and what we find is that supervisors seem to know what tasks are more amenable to be done at home and use that information in the assignment. So I'm going to conclude. Rather than going through the results again, I just want to highlight a few key features of the study. So we're studying a public sector organization that engages in a semi-routine task. This is important when you think about external validity and to what other settings this might or might not speak to. We find large heterogeneity in the individual level treatment effects. But we find that, again, that's not something I was able to show you today. When we increase the share of time spent working from home, we don't see additional productivity gains from that. So overall, this is a rosy picture of working from home, but we're only looking at productivity. If we were able to account for the time, the savings generated by the fact that they no longer have to commute and they need less office space, the picture would look rosier. So I'm going to stop now to hear your feedback and question, and I'm also happy to talk offline. So many people there. Thank you.
Great. So there's two other numbers that would actually, I think, push the productivity effect up. One question is, you normally see quit rates fall and productivity increases with tenure. So 12% is like holding the person constant. But for the firm, I've seen this in other settings and no one's ever really estimated it. People stick around for longer and they become more experienced. You could see the number be, 15, 16%. Be interesting if you can estimate that. The other thing would be, this is productivity conditional on hours worked. It would just be interesting to know if you include commute, which, coming back to some of the discussions yesterday, people treat as working time. And it's not clear that, that's kind of it's not obvious that's the right number, but then you're going to see numbers like 20, you could see really big numbers, put it this way, because also they're saving on commute. And that's right now seen as, we're not including that in working time, but you could easily include that in working time.
Your points are well taken. Unfortunately, we don't have data on commuting, but the other two suggestions are things.
The tenure effect, we've seen it a lot, actually. I often think in the studies, for a firm, what you care about is the productivity of your workers, not the productivity of Nick. You care about your average worker, they quit less and they get better over time. That boosts it. So.
Point well taken. Thank you so much. Chris?
Yeah, that 45-degree line is super, super interesting. One of the things that I noticed is that the rate of non-compliance with the assignment is pretty high. You have like 13% of people who are assigned to work from home, to work from the office who are working from home. Can you identify them or any persistent characteristics about who opts out of their assignment to go into the office? Because that might be very interesting to think about whether their characteristics are different.
I think this is something we have not yet done. It's very feasible. We have non-compliance in both directions, and it would be interesting to see those two dimensions and examine them separately potentially. Thank you for suggesting it. Lily.
This was so interesting. I was just interested when you were talking about the dedicated workspace and you were talking about external validity. Like, did you ask more if the dedicated workspace is like their own room? I think it's interesting what goes into a dedicated workspace that causes people to be able to focus more, and like how much does the company have to invest to get to that threshold of the dedicated workspace being sufficient?
This is a very good question. We were allowed only to run a very small survey, so we couldn't ask many questions, and so that's the only question we asked them. So we asked them what we meant by dedicated space is that they needed to have a chair, a desk, and the company provides like the laptop and the phone. I wish I could tell you more about it, and we can ask if we can survey them again. I don't know if that's going to be possible, but that's something we could potentially ask in another round of survey. Oh yes, please.
Thank you. Very nice experiment. It looks like there's coming a consensus where if you have individual tasks in big shared offices, it tends to be better to work from home. I wondered, because you showed that there are some people who have kids at home or family at home, and then you have the survey response, fewer distractions at home. Is there an interaction? If you have kids at home, maybe there's actually not fewer distractions at home, but that's a counteracting thing. And the second question, very nice, of course, the productivity improvement. Do you have any data on whether that comes at the cost of quality? Can you test that?
Yes, so I can test the latter, and it does not. Importantly, so most of our data is administrative. The administrative data does not contain information about the children. The information about the children comes from the survey. The survey was anonymous. So what I can do, so I cannot match my individual level treatment effect with the information, do you have a child or not. But what I can do is, within the survey, I can see that the age of the child is a determinant of whether you report fewer distractions at home, and the results go in the direction you would expect. So you're more likely to report fewer distractions when your children are older, not likely to do that at all if your children are very young. I think there's a tiny bit more. Yes, please.
Yeah, no, so going back to the topic of external validity, it seems to me that you probably have high external validity for this sort of job that requires fewer interactions, maybe something like IT support and so on, not necessarily in the public sector. And it's not obvious to me that most public sector jobs are going to so your external validity is probably better with those sorts of like IT support, non-interactive jobs than with more generally public sector jobs more broadly. So yeah, how do you think about that? I mean, yeah, you're kind of, or from the title, I thought this was going to be more broadly applicable to the public sector, and
so that is a challenge of our work. So the challenge is measuring output in general, but especially in the public sector, is really hard. So once you have an agency where you can measure that in a credible way, it's of course a very specific one. So I do take your point that external validity is an issue. So the way we think about it is we think, well, incentives are likely to matter, whether the organizations are public or private. So we think our results might not be likely to generalize to settings where the incentives are much stronger. Our task is pretty routine, right? Many public sector jobs don't have that. And so again, you might not be willing to generalize this to schools or hospitals, just to make a concrete example. And again, here there's no team interaction. So in some way, you can think of this as the best case scenario for working from home, because you don't have these creative tasks and you don't have these interactions. So I do take the point that we should be careful generalizing this to other public sector organizations, but this is the best we can do in terms of outcomes. If you have a way to measure better outcomes in a more broadly applicable organizations, I would be really, really happy to work with you.
No, I'm kind of spitballing here. But I mean, I think you don't necessarily have measures of productivity, but you might have measures of job performance as reflected in performance reviews or in promotions or something like that.
Yes.
I mean, you'd have to step a little bit away from kind of hard productivity metrics, but
yeah, there are other measures that could be looked at in other and more broadly applicable.
Very nice presentation, thank you. Along the same lines, I think it'd be interesting if there's any variation within this setting in the complexity or the value of tasks. I'm thinking about this in the in the Garicano, like Rossi Hansberg type knowledge hierarchy framework, where when you have to solve problems, sometimes you have to either kick problems to folks, talk over problems within your team, or kick them up to the next level of the hierarchy and all that. So, and that would be, maybe you would speak a little bit to this, like generalize the idea if either way, if this were, applicable to more complex tasks and you still find a productivity bump, or it goes the opposite way. I don't know if there's any measure of like, if you can get more granular on the task, basically.
No, so unfortunately, we don't have any way to determine how complex each of these cases are. So I understand why that would be very interesting to do. I could not find a way to measure it in a way that you would think credible. We can think more about it, but I'm not so hopeful on this point.
Really interesting study. I was wondering if there's any significant differences in treatment effect across the different teams.
No, they look very much alike.
Okay, interesting. Right,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we're basically out of time. And if you want to talk to me offline, of course, I'd be delighted to.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, be included on the agenda. I just want to also say thank you to the organizers. It's really remarkable how you've created a field that just didn't exist a number of years ago. And it's not the first time that you've created a field out of nowhere with management and all the turnover work. Thank you to the Hoover team, obviously, for the incredible mics and all that. I remember just a couple of years ago when it was like on the laptop right in the other room. So this is beautiful. So the message of this paper is actually pretty simple. It's that when the pandemic hit, and a lot of people went remote, time spent at work declined, time in leisure went up. But then as we started adjusting, figuring out what remote work was really like, how to do it, how to optimize with hybrid, that there seems to be some convergence and that the differences between remote and non-remote have shrunk. Now, the obvious question is what happened to productivity during this time? Because we didn't see a big decline in productivity during the pandemic. In fact, we actually kind of saw a little bit of immediate decline, but then it eventually started continue going up. And so there's going to be a story of selection here, and I'm going to hopefully be able to unpack some of those ideas. So I started with an original motivation slide, and then I thought, we already have enough motivation in a conference, and it's towards the end, so no more motivation. But I did want to put a Simpsons plot up here because doing justice to all the stuff that Nick does and bringing in good Simpsons quotes. I literally plugged in my introduction to ChatGPT and asked it to make a picture of Simpsons. I thought this was a pretty funny one because it was like 2019, it's everybody in suits except for Homer and, well, I guess only one guy had suits, but it was like typical office, and then right-hand side is like multitasking, doing a bunch of things, eating a donut. So let me fast forward past the kind of jokes aside part and get to the main course. Let's see. I think the digital. Yeah, that's exactly. That's the story. The digital gods wanted me to keep just on the jokes, but. So yeah, we've had enough kind of introduction to all this, so I don't want to kind of beat a dead horse. But yeah, we've seen a rise of hybrid. There's obvious questions about productivity. Unfortunately, I don't have nearly as good of an empirical setting as Alessandra does, but hopefully we'll have some useful takeaways. The big question that the American Time Use Survey obviously allows us to do, and I'm going to be using the American Time Use Survey to cut to the chase, and I'll show you a lot on the data side, is this granularity around the way that people are spending their time. How we spend our time on a day-to-day basis, how we break up activities between home production, leisure, et cetera, and we've already had a number of papers on the American Time Use Survey. And then looking at differences across demographic brackets, so you can look male, female, married, unmarried, children, non-children, et cetera. And then the big question of, well, how does this carry through to productivity? A critical mechanism in this paper, and I'm going to build a ROI model where people are able to self-select based on preferences and capabilities, is that jobs are different. So job demands are different. I grew up in a restaurant. Restaurants can't really be done remotely, but other things, a lot of the work that we do, a lot of the research that we do, can be done remotely. So there's differences in job requirements, and then there's differences in preferences. Some people like remote work more than others. Some people do better in environments that allow for a lot of autonomy, and so I'm going to build a model with that. This is a little bit of just some raw data. It doesn't look super pretty, but it will tell you kind of some of the main results. In the blue, I'm going to be using the Dingle-Niemann index, and I'm going to get more into measurement, but take it for now that I'm using Dingle-Niemann to classify remote and non-remote. So in the blue, you see time spent at work among high remote is higher in 2018, 2019 than the low Dingle-Niemann. But then during the pandemic, you see a reversal of this. In particular, in 2022, I mean, it couldn't kind of be any more reversed. But then by 2024, you see this convergence. And so what I'm going to do is take this to a multivariate setting and then build a model around it. So American Time Use Survey, we already know that well. I'm not going to repeat it. BEA, we also saw Octavio talk about the BEA, and so it's basically same sort of industry level data. Dingle-Niemann, we've seen this a billion times. I'm going to focus on employed workers. So there is an open question about flow into the labor force. I'm going to sample on employed full-time workers. I'm going to also focus on non-self-employed workers. I'm going to deflate earnings, all that sort of normal stuff. I will make, well, actually, one more point. I just brought in some data from Gallup, and I don't have a slide on this, but Gallup has a workforce panel that's about 20,000 respondents a quarter, and it's panel, so we can basically trace out the evolution from the same individual from 2019 onward. Now, the downside with the Gallup data is that we don't see these granular measures of time use, but we do see hours worked per week. So these results are going to be robust to focusing on that panel level data and basically comparing the same person 2019 versus 2023 and up to 2024. And has great measures of remote work, and hence the stuff that Nick and I are doing. We've validated the Dingle-Niemann index, I guess a number of papers by now, but just to, again, make the point that in this paper it seems to be a good proxy. What I'm doing here is plotting for high and low Dingle-Niemann occupations. I'm looking at the share of time working from home versus the office. So again, a beautiful thing about the American Time Use Survey is that you see where somebody is doing the activity. So you see if they're having coffee at home, you see if they're having coffee at a coffee shop, you see if they're working at home versus working in the office. And so you do see this really flat line among the low Dingle-Niemann. And if you saw more kind of volatility, then you would say, well, maybe this proxy over a 5-year span of time is not that, or actually a 6-year span of time isn't that good, but it actually seems to be sort of reasonable. Another way to validate it is just to collapse this at the occupational level, look at the Dingle-Neiman intensity at a 5-digit SOC level, and then compare it with the share of time working from home. There's a positive coefficient, obviously not perfect, but again, some evidence why it's useful. Okay, so the kind of interesting part begins. So we're going to have outcome variable is going to be time spent per minute spent per day in a particular activity K for an individual I in year T. And I'm going to be looking from 2018 to 2024. And I should have put a plot on this around pre-trends and going back to 2016, but we'll get to some of this. So minutes per day, right-hand side is index for remote ability. In particular, I'm going to be looking above the median, below the median. I'm going to be interacting that with year fixed effects and then normalizing. So I'm going to be doing basically 2020 to 2024, normalized to 2018 and 2019. Control for a bunch of demographics, control for the hourly wage or weekly earnings, put in industry and occupation fixed effects in. And so in the most parsimonious specification, we control for kind of the income channel, the fact that your earnings might be changing and therefore changing the return to labor market labor supply. But in addition, we're going to be comparing observationally equivalent people in the same occupation before versus after the pandemic. There can still be a lot of unobserved shocks that are not being picked up by these fixed effects, in particular selection. And so I'm going to try to do some work to show that it's not just driven by some of those selection effects. Main results, remote workers are allocating less time to labor supply over time. This doesn't seem to be driven by just commuting. The fact, and this came up about how do people classify work and do you consider time driving to the office as work. Leisure also goes up. There isn't a big change that I find in this data on home production and shopping. Not to say that necessarily there aren't changes. Obviously, we saw some really nice evidence from even better data. And for example, Stephanie's data on shopping was just, I mean, I'm not going to try to horse race ATIS shopping data to the quality that you have in your paper. But in this, it doesn't seem to be driven by as much there. So I took the motivation of trying to make beautiful plots. It maybe doesn't match the beauty of some of the plots that we've seen over the past 2 days, but this is one of the main results. So on the far left, you're just seeing a baseline specification that puts in basic demographics, and you're looking at the treatment effects for different years. So 2018 to 2019 is the kind of the omitted category, and so remote workers do spend more time. I should say individuals and occupations that rank above the median in remote ability, they do spend more time at work. But then you see a reversal during 2020 onward, and it really declines in 2022. In 2024, however, which is the last one, the kind of smallest with the biggest error band, that's where you see this convergence. And so one of the themes, and this is going to be part of the interpretation of the paper, is that during the pandemic, when we were all thrust into environments that we were not expecting, that the adjustment was very difficult, and maybe shirking went up, maybe just time at work went down, and it was more difficult. But then as we started getting adjusted, as organizations started making more clarity about what does hybrid work look like, then it started to thin. Then what the middle panel does, and then the far right panel does, it layers on additional controls. So in the middle, you're showing it controlling for earnings. That really doesn't change the results. So whether or not you put log earnings in really doesn't make a difference. On the far right, we put occupation fixed effects. Not surprisingly, when you put occupation fixed effects, the orange one is going to disappear because it's collinear. So you're just seeing the interactions with year. And results are pretty much the same there. And so I kind of tend to think that, yes, there's probably other omitted factors that I'm not controlling for, but it's fairly insensitive to the inclusion of a fair amount of controls, and that gives me a little bit of confidence that these are genuine. You can look at the converse. So you look at decline in labor supply, i.e. decline in time spent at work, time spent working, and you look at the changes in leisure as well. So leisure is basically the opposite of that. Leisure went up during these years, and it kind of continued into 2024, although it's not as big of an increase as it was in 2022. And again, results are fairly insensitive to the inclusion of additional controls and to occupational fixed effects. This is to make you work. Now we're at the half point of the presentation and make you look at a more difficult table. Actually, not that much to see here, other than there's not as many stars as there were in the previous plots. first three columns, home production, shopping, other, and childcare. So other is really interesting. So I'm going to start with columns 7 through 9, and it's just saturating the specification with additional controls. Column 7 being kind of basic demographics, column 8 adding in earnings, and then column 9 putting in the occupation and fixed effects. And what you can see is actually that time spent in this other category goes up, and it's statistically significant, especially in 2023 and 2024. And so actually, this is a question, and maybe somebody has an answer for me in the Q&A period, is what does this other category in ATIS represent? Maybe it represents like social media and doom scrolling. It's possible. Maybe there's better categories in ATIS that precisely measure social media time, but we kind of have anecdotal evidence that people go on X or on TikTok, and they think they're there for 10 minutes, and then it's like there for a whole hour. So the other category could be representing remote workers going on social media a little bit more often. Again, that's a possible interpretation. I'm not 100% sure. You do see some changes, obviously, in home production, but not as much statistical significance here. An obvious point is that, well, hey, maybe you want to look at the individuals that have kids, and so you restrict the sample, and so I do some work on that. So in columns 1 through 3, a big part of home production is caring for children, and so I've also restricted columns 1 through 3 just to focus on the people with kids. But actually, to cut to the chase a little bit, there's one of the interesting results, and this will come up in maybe 1 or 2 more slides, is that the people where labor supply declines the most are actually single males without kids. And so this is sort of consistent with like when you give young guys a lot of time, and not as much responsibility. Don't expect the best things to happen. And so I'll show you that plot on another one. So it's not like, hey, remote workers and then the normal person that's at their job is shirking. It actually seems to be a little bit more the youth. This just basically presents the plots that I showed you in a tabular format and with 2 different definitions from Aguiar and Hurst about how you define leisure. Leisure definition 2 is a little bit more general. It includes sleeping and some other activities, and you find similar effects. Nothing too interesting. I did a placebo where I just looked at before. So the better way to do this, and I just need to put a plot in. I should have put a plot in the slides where you just do a normal pre-trends and you make a nice plot instead of a table. But I did a placebo where basically I looked at 2017 to 2019 and whether or not remote workers have any differential trends here. There's no stars, so it's not as if that the high Dingle-Niemann versus low Dingle-Niemann were on separate trajectories. I'm going to get back to that. Okay, so then a natural question that comes up is about commuting time. Obviously, commuting changed a lot during this span of time. ATIS has a nice way to look at pure work activities, and so I call pure work in column 2, which is excluding commuting time, and you do see this decline that happens there. Again, you don't see as statistically significant effect. I mean, you see really no effect in 2024, but it's really concentrated in 2022, 2023. And then I also break it out by work-related and other income-generating activities. So individuals that maybe hold secondary jobs or maybe have a real estate business on the side or whatnot. A couple alternative explanations that one could be theorizing. Are workers reallocating time to other productive activities? I don't see this big change in household chores or shopping, which is consistent with the heterogeneous treatment effects that I'll show you in 1 or 2 plots, which is basically that it's younger males. And so younger males without kids don't have that much chores around the house, and maybe a studio to take care of. So that also will make sense. No significant change in job search activities as well. It just asks people about, are you spending your time to look for other jobs? So let me keep speeding up because actually I do want to get to the model and I don't want to just like basically show you an equation and be like, and there's the conclusion. So the only thing I'm going to leave off on, kind of already previewed the heterogeneity results. Squinting at that table is just not right. So let me show you this thing with the Gallup data. So Gallup tracks these individuals over a period of time. And what I'm going to do is put in person fixed effects and compare individuals in 2019 relative to 2022 to 2024. And we have a measure of hours worked per week, basically. So I look at the log of that. You find small effects. That could be because there's measurement error. And one thing that we know when you have a variable with measurement error, there's some attenuation. And but the key result result is just to see 2022, 23, 24, negative coefficients. Column 2, that adds the person fixed effects. It's also negative, a 1.1% decline. But again, only significant at the 10% level. So what I'm not sure about is whether or not this data is particularly suited to study time use, but it's a helpful robustness exercise. The one thing that I can't reconcile, though, is that because there is a significant effect in 2024, and in ATIS there's not as much of a significant effect, it does raise a little bit of a question. So a little bit more work I'll do on sample selection and seeing. Okay, implications for productivity. This is the first desk rejection I got in this paper was you should talk about productivity. So we're talking about it now, and I'm going to show you some reduced form evidence, and then I'm going to show you the model. If we take the BEA data that Octavio already explained and basically put it in a regression format, and you do regressions of real value-added growth or real output growth on your interactions with Dingle-Niemann. So now, instead of working at an occupational level, you're working at an industry level, and so you basically use the OEWS data, crosswalk that into industry, and then you have shares of remote intensity and look above the median, below the median. You see positive effects. And so that's kind of interesting because you say, oh, well, if we're finding these declines in labor supply, why are we finding this increase in productivity? And so I'm going to build a bit of a model to explain why we might see that. So in a Roy model, there's the critical idea is that there's self-selection into jobs based on people's ability. And there's a nice paper by Andres Rosa and co-authors in AEJ Macro in 2024 where they lay out a nice version of a model that I'm going to adapt for these purposes. I always remember, I mean, as a first-year doctoral student, you read papers and you're like, how did they think of this model? And then you're like, oh, okay, somebody's building on another model. So I'm going to be piggybacking on Rosa et al. So there's going to be an intensive margin of labor supply. There's going to be these preferences for leisure and nonlinearities in effort. Nonlinearities in effort is going to be a major concept. I'm going to get to that with an equation in just a second. There's going to be this heterogeneous sorting. Structural changes in the workforce might lead to new sorting patterns. So when companies decide to shift more to remote work, then there's going to be this new sorting pattern that opens up. Workers might, and so this is a key insight, workers might transition into roles that they're actually better suited for, in particular now that you're able to apply for a job in a completely different geography. That opens up new matching patterns. Preferences are pretty simple. CRRA, we've got log consumption plus a disutility of labor supply and labor supply. Critically, phi is going to be indexed by I, so there's going to be heterogeneity by individual, and that heterogeneity is going to allow for some of this self-selection. You could also represent that heterogeneity on the production side, but there is going to be we'll show you something on the production side. So we're going to have two different types of labor. One is going to be high remote, HR, and not human resources. HR, high remote, and then low remote, LR. Zeta is going to be governing the elasticity of substitution, and K is going to index the sector. So sectors will have different degrees of substitutability due to coordination costs and all that sort of good stuff. And then on the individual side, we're going to have individuals putting in time, but theta K is going to govern the nonlinearity of labor supply. So some individuals can put in an hour and get a lot more mileage than somebody else that maybe puts in an hour. And then A is going to be indexing the individual productivity term. I'm going to basically match this data, calibrate it with method of moments, match everything exactly, and let me just kind of land the plane now that there's a minute left to show some of these results. Actually, let me, so I matched the data, that works well, and then the two counterfactuals. So you always build a model to do counterfactuals. So one of them is going to say, let's hold employment shares constant in 2019 rates. Let's pretend like the pandemic didn't happen and that there wasn't this resorting. What is output going to look like? The second is going to say, assume that individuals have homogeneous preferences. Assume that individuals, actually, some people, I mean, I like working. My phi is like, I don't know, put a 0 there or something like that. So there's homogeneous preferences. So heterogeneity in preference is actually great for the labor market because people are able to sort into jobs that maybe somebody else doesn't want to do, but I want to do. And so what I show in the bottom panels here is these two counterfactual simulations, and maybe put in a plot is actually maybe it's better just to put numbers, but on the bottom left in the orange, you see in the present, so basically what ended up happening versus 2019. And so we're comparing the two shares and just showing that, again, the counterfactual hold employment shares constant at 2019 rates. So if we had held the shares constant, you would have lower output. The difference between the blue and the orange is about 12%. So the fact that we had this sorting into new industries, new occupations, led to an increase in output. On the far right is the second simulation that basically says hold fixed everybody's preferences and imagine that they're all the same. And you see that there's lower output in the case where people have homogeneous preferences because there isn't this optimal sorting. So let me just stop here by saying main results is that labor supply goes down, time and leisure tends to go up. But the reason why we didn't see this big productivity decline in the aggregate statistics seems to be because of some of this reallocation on the individual sorting side. So really looking forward to comments. This is the optimal place to be for feedback, so really grateful for it.
It's a very interesting presentation. One thing I was wondering, I think you can only see one person in the household, is that right? So maybe, you could see like different responses for a household with 2 adults, where some of this could be a reallocation of tasks within the household. So if you split it out by single adult households and multi-adult households, you might get a better sense for how much is reallocation and how much is a change in the household level time allocation. I guess this is specific to what we're working on, maybe too specific, but I was thinking about how online shopping is classified in the time use survey, whether this shows up in the grocery category or whether if you're using an app, say it shows up in the organization category or some other type of category.
Yeah, great questions. There is, individuals are asked about spousal labor supply, spousal earnings, and so I can look at that. Because the effects, and I will, I guess, bring this table up, although it's a bit of a pain to look at, is the heterogeneous treatments table. So in the column 3, column 4. So you see the biggest decline in 2022 among single, that's the 71.4. So 71.4 minutes per day less in labor supply. And so that's part of the reason why I mean, reallocation is probably playing a role, but because the biggest declines are concentrated among single and those without kids, tells me that there's something going on. And this connects with the big debate that we're having about social media and that individuals might be doing it out of their own volition, but there's the literature on dynamic inconsistency, and sometimes you say yes to something that maybe in retrospect you wouldn't have said yes to do. Thank you. And also look into the online shopping. Definitely the work with Eric Benurolfson that we have with the remote life survey, we do ask about online shopping, and so we need to go back. That was one of the papers we presented like 2 years ago, but never actually utilized that online shopping data. So this is maybe a perfect opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. This is super interesting. In the literature, actually, there's a way to capture multitasking and the presence of other people when you're doing an activity. I think now you could use that kind of measures to tap into the productivity, right? So, for example, one hypothesis is that why the married people with children are now decreasing their work time so much as the single people is because they are doing other things while working, right? So that may be an alternative explanation to your study.
Yeah, that's a good mechanism or a kind of explanation for why we see. Also, people, I mean, if it's sort of like the quote in dodgeball, if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. So if you can have kids, you can multitask with kids, you can probably do a lot of other type of multitasking and do some hard things. So cheers to all the parents in the room. Yeah, next.
I think it would be very interesting to use the Gallup data to say something about who changes their time allocation, because obviously that's going to be a heterogeneous thing in the context of your model. I mean, I had big debates with people about what the labor supply effects of COVID were because I worked all the time. And then my friends who were software engineers were just like, yeah, we sat on the beach and didn't do anything. And so as a result, like, I think one of the things that you can do to better contextualize some of the Roy results is to use the Gallup data to think about who increases their hours and who might cut back on their hours based on pre-period characteristics. And then if you can tell us something about how that sorting maps into the model, that would be, I think, very useful, because as of now, I think the model is just this GMM type of thing where everything happens through an error term and heterogeneous preferences and whatever, but you can actually probably pin some of that down with the data.
Yeah. Is there, on the pre-pandemic characteristics, what do you think would be the most salient? Is it like industry occupation or something at the individual level that you think particularly jumps out?
Can you see performance pay or career concerns or something like that?
Yeah, there's some information on that. Yeah, actually, and yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, the Gallup data has these really great measures of perceptions about the workplace and attitudes and engagement, and that's probably the best. Is that one thing Gallup is known for is something called the Q12, basically 12 questions that they ask to proxy for employee engagement, and so that would probably be the best proxy. I can definitely do that. Thank you.
I'm not sure what your referee comments were with regards to productivity, but I think something big that you're showing that so we certainly see and we think is a big effect is the increase in leisure, which is going to be consistent with a big increase in welfare when people work from home because they're saving all this commuting time, and so having hard facts about how much that is I think very valuable, and that's one way in which you could pitch the paper. I think the productivity effects, I don't know. It's not so clear to me that you have the data and the setting that would really help you make a contribution on productivity, whereas with leisure and the potential welfare effects of that, you're definitely better positioned.
Yeah, the value of leisure and putting a price tag to that. Yeah. You think there's a good way to, how much people value leisure? Is there a...
So in the new version of working from home, of why working from home will stick, that we keep promising to put out and keep delaying, we're trying to do this basically by calibrating to people's labor supply, their reported commute time, and so on. So, cool. I think you could do something similar, and we can talk more.
Well, we have a commitment device now that the paper will come out because it's on the record. So, Nick, you had a question?
Sorry. On the just on follow up, there's an old science paper with Alan Kruger, Danny Kammerman, some others in 2002 that values activities per hour.
Yeah.
And so it has in there. I know that paper well because it has the value of the hate of working is the same as the hate of commuting. So people dislike them. So I had a question on, I guess, for people that use time use diaries, and a bit following on from some of Stephanie's comments, which is, I assume if I'm in ATIS and I'm going to work 9 till 5, I report I'm working for 8 hours. If I'm at home and I'm working 9 till 5, but say I take half an hour for lunch, watch 10 minutes of TikTok or whatever, and chat to my spouse or something, what do I report? Because in the office I'm probably scrolling around and I'm having lunch with a friend and chatting about football. I don't know. I don't know if anyone's looked at it, but I would think that maybe people report they're working more in the office when they're goofing off. Then, but does anyone know? Has anyone compared actually self-reported to other hard data like keystrokes? Or I don't know if Liam knows this. Do you have any idea from Time Doctor? Well, I guess you need to match up ATIS to like actual, because you have
completely different data sets here. It would be very interesting to see how ATIS would compare to more of an advanced workforce analytics tool to be able to kind of correlate that data.
Be interesting to take your, I don't know if you could, and just record in Time Doctor. Because that seems to push against people. That would be one reason why people at home appear to be working less. There may be just
upwards bias towards reporting that you're working.
Yeah, because if I imagine I work from home and I spend 45 minutes having lunch with my spouse or something, or just watching TV, I probably don't record that as work. Whereas in the office, I probably just think my working time starts when I get in and stops when I leave.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is that with the diaries, basically people are recording the particular activity it's either every 30 minutes or every 15, it must be every 30 minutes. And so there is an endeavor to have precision, but nonetheless, there could still be, we'll call it a working lunch because I'm meeting a colleague. And so
like the equivalent is law firms. Law firms, you bill every 6 minutes, but apparently in their day, there's no going to the toilet. But I mean, lawyers must go to the toilet. I mean, they must do, they don't just, but you see their full days, so they're clearly including.
Yeah. They're thinking, that's funny. Okay, great. I think we're out of time, but thank you so much for the engagement and for the great questions and thoughtful feedback.